Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexis Alvarez, and I'm the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services. I'm very excited to welcome you all here today to talk about a topic that often is anxiety provoking and makes us all feel doomed, student loans. But the exciting part about this conversation is it is to give you some guidance, to give you some hope, and to get you up to speed on all things to navigate the student loan process. So welcome to Rise Above the Red, Strategies for Managing and Repaying Student Loans, New and Old. Before we move into the content, I want to give some housekeeping announcements. First and foremost, this is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent to all of you who are here and all of you who registered. That recording will come in an email from Zoom within 24 hours of this event. But if you don't receive it, don't worry. I'm going to pop my email into the chat, jot it down, and you can always reach out to me directly, and I'll make sure that you get that recording. Second piece of housekeeping announcements are your CLE credits. In addition to the valuable knowledge that we're going to learn here today, you will also be awarded CLE credit for your attendance. This was approved for one general CLE credit through the Florida Bar, and I will drop that CLE code into the chat at the end of today's presentation. I will also say it out loud, and that CLE code will come to you along with the recording in that email from Zoom within 24 hours. Third piece of housekeeping announcements, questions and answers. We rarely have the opportunity to pose questions to someone with an expertise in this subject. We are here with someone who is unbelievably knowledgeable about the student loan process. Ask your questions. Don't be shy. Drop them into the chat or the Q&A, and I will do my best to aggregate them appropriately and provide those questions to our presenter at the end of the presentation if time permits, or during if it's something we can catch as we're going through the conversation. Final piece of housekeeping announcements, closed captions. They are enabled for anybody that needs that extra accessibility. You should be able to go over to the three dots on the side, click where it says more, and you should be able to enable your captions. If you have a different platform or need some assistance, please just message me directly in the chat and I'll work to onboard you. And the housekeeping announcements being out of the way, I do want to make reference to the public interest law section of the Florida Bar, who, in addition to our speaker, made this happen, brought this conversation to our audience. Thank you so much to our folks at PILS. And if you are interested to learn more about PILS and joining PILS, I'm also going to drop some information about PILS into the chat for you to check out. So moving on to the introductions of our speaker here today, I'm incredibly honored to share this platform with Christie Arkovich, who is an attorney with Arkovich Law Legal Solutions for Consumers. Ms. Arkovich has been a Florida licensed attorney for more than 25 years since graduating Stetson College of Law in 1992 with honors. She is a member of the National Association of Consumer Bankruptcy Attorneys and the National Association of Consumer Advocates and the American Bankruptcy Institute and the Tampa Bay Bankruptcy Bar Association. Ms. Arkovich is a frequent speaker at various consumer-oriented continuing legal education seminars for attorneys and writes a quarterly column for the Tampa Bay Bankruptcy Bar Association titled Student Loan Sidebar about recent student loan related laws, regulations, and developments nationwide. Whenever possible, Ms. Arkovich takes the opportunity to share her knowledge about student loans that she gained from her prior work as trial counsel for Sallie Mae, ECMC, and other student loan servicers or grantors, and from her practice now on the consumer side of things. Christie, in the little time that I've been able to speak with you, I am in awe of your expertise and your kindness. Thank you so much for providing us with this training. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexis. I appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone for your public service and the things that you guys do as well. Basically, with student loans, the key that I've always tried to focus on is to make sure that you don't take the approach of just putting your head in the sand and not addressing your student loans. There was a show a couple weekends ago, the John Oliver show, Last Week News, I think is what it's called. And he did it on student loans. And I thought it was really good in telling people how we got to this problem, but there really wasn't anything addressing solutions. There was nothing in the show about telling people, well, there's a couple things you need to do to get in line for this, to register for this, to do things. And that part of the show, I think I was a little disappointed in because not all the things are automatic. So the purpose of today is to make sure that you're just kind of aware of some of these options, some of the things to do, and then know of some deadlines that are coming up. And so we'll cover first identifying what you have, and then going into some of the federal things that you can do, ending with some of the options that you might have with private loans and where to find some information. We're talking about new options and old. Some of these options have been around for a while. Some of the fixes lately have been to close loopholes or, to fix basically things that were wrong with programs before. And that's working. We have the new SAVE program, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I know that's probably a big question that a lot of borrowers have is, what is this SAVE program and how can it help me? Um, One of the things I'd like to point out first before we begin is our YouTube channel. One of the things with student loans is that it changes rapidly. All the time, we're reading about new things out there, new programs, new little fixes or tweaks to existing programs. And so there's a couple ways you can keep track of that. The Department of Ed does press releases. If you Google press release Department of Ed, that'll come up. Unfortunately, they're not advocacy related, so they're not really telling folks what they need to do and how to do it, but they're more focused on, here's the amount of relief that we're giving to borrowers this week, and here's the number of borrowers that will benefit from this, or here's what's going to happen. And I like that. But we try to focus on the advocacy part. So take a look at our YouTube sidebar. It's sort of an extension of what we do for our local bankruptcy court, where we write these quarterly columns. It actually turns out to be a page or two on student loans. Instead of in writing, this is by video. And so we try to title each video what we're trying to focus on, what change has occurred, and then what you need to do, whether it applies to you, and then what you need to do to obtain that. And then, of course, you can always reach out to us for strategy sessions on your individual loans if you like. And that you can just email us or call our office. And I have the information at the end of our webinar. Our email is info@christiearkovich.com, and our phone number will be there and so forth too. So the first question that you should have for your own loans, or if you're looking to do this for others, is, what are you dealing with? How much student loan debt is there? Do you have Parent Plus loans that you maybe have signed for children, or have your parents signed for you? And then one of the key things that we see is a lot of people might be on a standard program. When I graduated in 89 for undergrad and 92 for law school, I was automatically placed on a 10-year repayment. There was no income-driven plans or anything like that in existence at that time. And that 10-year repayment wasn't hard to do because tuition wasn't that high then, but now it is, of course. And so the 10 years is often turned into 20 years or 30 years, and you don't know it. We've actually had some people that have come to us when they thought they were on a 10-year standard and know they're on a 30-year. And usually they'd paid an enormous amount of interest, but they had paid very, very little for their principal. So it's important to know the term of your loans. The interest rates, statute of limitations, refinancing, all that is a point of contention as well. It's something you need to know. I don't see anybody refinancing loans right now, and I probably wouldn't, because if you're taking a federal loan, you're making it private, you're taking yourself out of the federal system that may foreclose any kind of forgiveness opportunities that you might have. So be cautious about refinancing. Back when rates were very, very low, we sometimes would suggest that for attorneys, because we recognize that the income-driven plans, while great in the first years, actually provided for a higher loan balance at the end. Now, that is corrected with SAVE, and I'll go into why in a few minutes. But you also want to see, are there co-signers with the loans, whether it's federal or private. There's a big issue with FFEL loans versus direct loans. There's virtually no reason to be a FFEL loan anymore. And what that is federal family education loans. It's the very first federal loans that were initiated. And they are federal loans, yes, but they're privately originated, and they're also usually privately or commercially held, not always. But sometimes you don't know who actually holds your loan because you may have it serviced by a private company, but owned by the federal government. So it's a little fuzzy there. But there's really no reasons to be a FFEL loan any longer. Now, direct loans are where the action is. That's where the forgiveness is. That's where public service forgiveness is. You have to have a direct loan. Now, there is a way to correct that, and it's open until April 30. And that would be to take your older FFEL loans, Family Federal Education loans, or your Perkins loans, or even HEAL loans, the health, I forget what it stands for, health something. The program was discontinued, I think, in the late 90s, but there's still a lot of those loans out there. You can change all those loan types and make them direct loans. If you do so before April 30, there's some benefits in doing so. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. That's called the IDR audit. And if you don't know what you have, the best way to do that is go on to the National Student Loan Database Report. Pull that. You can pull it on the website I have there. You can go on studentaid.gov and you can pull it there. But basically, that'll tell you your loan types. The servicers have gotten better in this. They now will often say FFEL or direct before a loan, but they never used to. And people had major problems trying to figure out what they had. And unfortunately, the servicers, a lot of them had representatives that were telling people, oh, your loans don't qualify, or your loans are private. When no, they're not. They're federal loans, they're just not direct loans. And that's an issue. So you want to identify what all you've got. So the IDR audit, that's the first thing I want to really emphasize today. The reason for that is in this John Oliver show, there's 9 million subscribers. So there's a lot of people who probably are going to watch that show, but there was no mention of this IDR audit deadline. And I did mention it to them before. I was hopeful that they were going to put that in there. I wanted to put a comment in the top of the feed, but I unfortunately let time get away from me. And I think there were 9,000 comments by the time I remembered to go back and to try to do that. But the IDR audit is super important. The deadline is a little more than a month away, April 30. And what it's designed to do is, when you might have called your servicer and said, hey, I'm having a hard time making my payment. What can you do for me? They would automatically put someone in forbearance. And the argument was that that was something very quick. Someone could do over the phone. There was no documentation. There's no discussion, keeping that call center representative on the line. The CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, has alleged that our major loan servicer at the time basically would offer incentives to its customer service reps to get people off the phone, to have the shortest call duration. So they're not going to take the time to go through, well, here's public service and how it works. Here's some other programs that might apply for you. Here's income driven. Here's the forgiveness, how that works at the end. People that went on IDRs didn't even know what they were. They didn't know there was forgiveness at the end. They didn't know that they had to recertify income. And it just amounted to years and years of forbearance. And unfortunately, that's bad because the balance it keeps getting bigger. And you have capitalizing interest after each forbearance. And so you ended up with someone who might graduate with 30,000. All of a sudden, it becomes 70 or 80 or 90 or even more. And so the Department of Ed is not that big. It's the biggest bank nowadays, but it's not really intended to be that. And it's not organized for that. And so they didn't have the manpower to go through all the different loan programs out there. Loan balances out there and things. So instead, what they did is they came up with this program, this IDR audit. They would basically give people credit for times that they were in an extended forbearance. Most deferments will also count, but they give you a deadline, and that is April 30. And what they're going to do is you have to apply to consolidate your loans before April 30. The consolidation doesn't actually have to be done, but the application needs to be submitted. You can do it online, a paper app, anything like that. And one of the nice things is this is a backdoor to public service. So those of you who are working public service on this show, this John Oliver show that I keep mentioning over and over again, I don't know why, there was someone on there that had paid one penny less than their payment each month. And so their payments were not going to count. And so that is fixed by this. Even though the public service limited waiver has expired October, I think it was, of 2022. And so this is a backdoor to that. You can fix that problem. Your payment will count. So basically any payments will count, whether they were paid ahead status, whether they were a penny off, whether they were under the wrong loan type for public service. In other words, they were direct or Perkins they were FFEL or Perkins rather than direct. If they were on the, on anything, as long as a payment was made, or a forbearance that was extended, which is basically more than 36 months cumulative or more than 12 months at a time. Most deferments count, and that's huge. And you don't lose any IDR time. So if you consolidate, that's one of the biggest fears that folks have about consolidating, is that they think that they're going to have a higher interest rate, and they think that they're going to lose credit for payments they've already made. Neither of those happen. It's market weighted, which means it's neutral for your interest rate. It should be the same based on the amount of loans that you have and the prior interest rates. And then also it will not lose your history. And that's usually what happens when you consolidate. You lose your prior history. You just have a brand new loan. Until April 30, that doesn't happen. You do not lose your history. And so this IDR audit is particularly a windfall for those that might have gaps in education. In other words, if you have an older loan from bachelor's, you can combine it now with the consolidation with a newer, say, master's loan, and it will cause them all to be redated. So the masters will go back in time to the earliest loan repayment date as if you've been in income driven all along. And the importance of that is income driven. You know, once you're in there for a certain amount of time, your loans are forgiven. Public service is 10 years. Most loans are 20 years or 25 years. And so we're seeing people from the 1990s, of course, that's more than 20 years ago. If you take advantage of this and you consolidate your loans, you may have an immediate forgiveness, or very soon, if you just have a few months left or a year left, you can enroll in something like Save. And it is an opportunity to change. We don't like HEAL loans. They don't have as many payment options and things available. It's a good opportunity to change those to direct. Again, you don't lose the history and things. The audits are supposed to, this is a big question, when are they going to be done? They've already started. They started working on them in September. We've had a lot already forgiven. They're supposed to be finished by July 1. With the elections this year, I would not be surprised if it's not continued a little bit beyond. We'll just have to see. Not real sure about that. But this is a good opportunity now that we've kind of discussed this audit a little bit and some of the initial things to see, Alexis, if we have any questions so far. If not, I'll go ahead and continue.
No questions so far. Did you want me to pull up a PowerPoint for you, or are you looking at it? Because we're not able to see a PowerPoint. So I want to make sure if we're pulling up a PowerPoint, if you need me to do that, I can do it.
Oh, I'm looking at it here. I pulled it up. Maybe screen sharing, we need to
Yep.
enable that.
Yep, that would be helpful. Are you able to? And if you're, let me pull it up on my end, and you can tell me what slide you're on. That way we can get up to speed with you.
I'll just go to the first one real quick, but share screen. Oh, I guess I had to hit share and I didn't realize it.
Yep. Yep.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. And
Okay.
so go ahead and play. Perfect.
All right, sounds good. So this was, I'm sorry about that. Well, at least we caught it on slide 4. That works. This was our YouTube channel information. You can reach it just by typing in Arkovich and YouTube. It comes right up. But if you want the specific address, it's on here. I understand, Alexis, you'll probably have these slides available for everybody.
Correct.
Good place to keep up to date. This is just how to identify some of the loans that you have. Again, you can find that out on studentaid.gov. And then screen 4 was some of the specifics on that IDR audit. And thank you so much for telling me about the screen share. I didn't even realize you couldn't see that.
Of course. When one question came in, but I'm asking it to be rephrased.
Okay.
So at the next point, I'll make sure it's brought up to your attention.
Okay, sounds good. And so again, this IDR audit has a deadline of 4/30. So it doesn't mean you've missed it. Doesn't mean there's not enough time, because consolidations take longer than 30 days. They actually take about 45 days on average. You just need to submit to consolidate. You can do that online through studentaid.gov. You can contact your servicer, do it by mail with them or on their portal. And it's sometimes important to consolidate even direct loans, even though you already have a direct loan. If they're dated all over the place, you might want to consolidate them so that you'll have one IDR start date. So for public service loan forgiveness, you want to have your start date one particular date so that all of your 120 months will run from that date. Otherwise, you'll kind of have a little bit of a mess. And so it's important to maybe date those all the same. And right now, by doing this by 4/30, you don't lose any prior history. It also goes to the earliest loan repayment date of any of the loans within that consolidation. Even if you'd had a prior consolidation, it will pull the earliest loan repayment date of that batch. That's really important if you had bachelors that were separated by masters, if you had that gap in education. So it's a really good thing to take advantage of that by April 30 again. The only cautionary tale I would say is if you have Parent Plus loans, there's a certain way to consolidate them. It is not where you consolidate them all together and then you do it all over again. That is not what a double consolidation is. Instead, it's taking half one way, half the other way, and doing it in a certain order. We'll cover that in a minute. There's a benefit of doing that, and that is that you might be able to get Parent Plus loans into Save, which is much less expensive than the other options available. So for those with Parent Plus loans, maybe talk with us, maybe learn what double consolidation is before you just go out and consolidate your loans. Everyone else with FFEL loans, though, I don't know really why you'd want to remain a FFEL, or at least if you think you do, know why you do, make a decision that you want to keep your loans exactly as they are. The importance here is knowing what you have and coming up with a plan to deal with it, as opposed to trusting the servicer. Don't trust the servicer, because it's important to get assistance on these loans, either increase your base of knowledge or watch seminars like this, consult with folks like me, do things, YouTube videos, do things to make your decisions. Don't rely on the servicer. The servicer is nothing more than a debt collector. They will say that if there's grounds to sue them in lawsuits, they previously said there's no expectation on the borrower's behalf that we represent them. We represent the creditor. And therefore, you're talking with the debt collector as to what you should do. Don't do that. You need to know yourself. And so a lot of folks are getting into Save. I want to put a little bit more attention on Save here. Some of the other stuff we'll go through a little bit more quickly. Save is what is the old Repay. One of the key characteristics, the differences of the old Repay, which is a 10% plan that was passed under President Obama's watch, is that Save allows you to file a separate tax return and exclude your spouse's income. Repay did not have that option. So if you have now enrolled in Save and you see that your Save payment is a little too high for your income, know that you can file a separate tax return. I think that's really important now that our tax deadline is coming up. What you cannot do is go back and fix it with an amended return. So if you've already filed a tax return this year, it'll be for next year that you're talking about. However, you may find that your Save payment will go down automatically in July if you have undergrad loans. And the reason for that is because Save was implemented in two sections. The first was last August, when the pause was ending, and everyone was put on a 10% plan, whether you had grad loans or undergrad loans, if you win an income-driven plan. And income-driven, as you probably know, or just in case you don't know, is basically where you tell your servicer that my income is not enough for a standard payment. I need to be on an income-driven plan. I need to be able to have my payment adjustable based on my income. And I need to have forgiveness at the end. For public service loan forgiveness, you should know, and I want to mention that because a lot of folks here who are listening are public service, the income-driven plans all qualify for public service, as well as the 10-year standard. The 20-year standard doesn't, 30-year standard doesn't, any of the fixed, extended fixed, for instance, any of the other plans don't qualify. You have to be the 10-year standard or income-driven. But come July 1, anyone with a Save payment, if you have undergrad loans, your 10% payment will drop to 5%. So if you have, say, 50-50 loans, you have 50% are grad loans, that payment will remain 10%. The undergrad portion, though, will drop to 5%. So that means your payment might be roughly 75% of what it was. And the math is something you can do on your own there. What they did do initially is they raised the poverty level, the difference in Repay and Pay. Under Repay, it was 150%. So what that meant is a student loan payment was not even taken from a base amount. So if your income was no more than the poverty level, or not that much more, then your payment was probably ridiculously low, if anything. That 150% of poverty level has jumped up to 225%. And so again, they don't take a student loan payment from that. If you have a high Save payment, you can also contribute more for retirement. Things that lower your AGI income will in turn lower your student loan payment. Not a Roth IRA, but things like a IRA, traditional, or 401k, health savings account, things like that. You can also use alternative documentation. You can use pay stubs instead of a tax return if you get a bonus every year. So you can do little things, little tricks to basically lower your payment. And then it's good for 12 months until you recertify. Don't recertify if you don't have to. Some people are still using pre-COVID income, and they're allowed to do that. You have to be truthful in what you're submitting to them, but if they're not asking for you to recertify, then don't do it if you have a higher income now. And one of the nice things about SAVE is that it stops this interest from accruing. That was one of the huge problems out there. We had loan balances that continued to go up with all the years of forbearance, and there's an interest subsidy. So if your payment is not enough to pay the interest for that month, then that interest will be waived. So where that's important is, let's say you'd like to pay down the loans. Let's say you're not making much money now. You're not going to work 10 years public service, so you're not going to utilize that program. You like the lower payment now, but you want to make sure that you don't have a huge loan to pay later. That's where SAVE comes in. And you also can pay down the loan if you'd like, but I wouldn't suggest that you pay down monthly, because if you do, you're paying that interest that would otherwise be waived. Instead, if you do want to pay it down, either do so at the end or annually, maybe annually. Every year, if you see that you have some extra money or you get a bonus or something, maybe use that to pay, because the amount of interest that would be waived that month is not that much. And your payment would then go mostly to principal. So there are some things to keep in mind if you want to pay your loans down instead of remain on SAVE forever. And then SAVE does have the advantage that if you didn't borrow very much, sometimes you may have immediate forgiveness with small balances. We don't really see that in our practice. Most people that reach out to us have 50,000 of loans. We've had up to $1 million of loans. So I don't know if I've ever actually seen that, but I know it exists. So this is just some more detail about SAVE. These will be on the slides. One of the nice things that will prevent, I think, some accidental defaults. I don't know if you knew this, but if you default in a student loan payment and you don't make payments for a period of time, they will add 25% to the balance when you default. And so what this does is that if you've linked your IRS return, if you forget to recertify, or something gets lost, or it just doesn't get done by the servicer, they will automatically enroll you into SAVE using your last filed tax return if you're delinquent after 75 days. I think that's good, because there's a lot of people who didn't even know they had to recertify their income, or dealing with the servicer, they got tired of the 2-hour waits and holds and things, and they just gave up and didn't do it, and then they accidentally defaulted. The interest savings is huge, and don't think I really need to go through that anymore. But basically, that's designed to fix one of the biggest problems that we have. Double consolidation. For an hour presentation, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, but I do want to let you know that it is working. How it's working is Congress, first of all, they have said that Parent Plus loans are only eligible for ICR. ICR, income contingent repayment. It's not as good of a program. It's not as low of a payment as SAVE. A lot of people hate it. I have one person who reached out to me last week that has a $6,000 payment under standard, and ICR is not that much better, actually. So we're looking at doing a double consolidation for them. And so when you double consolidate, you may be able to get into SAVE. That's the goal. I won't get into all the reasoning why. It has to do with the tagging of the loans, and now they've tagged it differently, but there is a new rule, and it allows people who do a double consolidation, as long as you do it before next summer, you will be eligible for SAVE. It will not be on the dashboard, though. So if you go to your portal or studentaid.gov, if you've done a double consolidation of Parent Plus loans, you will not see SAVE as an option. We used to have our clients call their servicer and get it that way. They've stopped that. Now you have to actually send it by mail. That's okay. It's no big deal. It's just send with tracking information if you can. Here's the rule that I'm talking about, where they actually are allowing this. There was a big debate back in the fall as to whether or not this was still happening, but it clearly is. There's a lot of people getting into SAVE now. Here's the steps on how you do it. You basically take half of your loans, and with one servicer, you take the other half with another servicer. There are limits as to how many online consolidations you can do every 6 months. So we recommend doing one online, one by paper. Let them run concurrently. It takes about 45 days. Then combine them again, another paper, because you're still within that 6 months, and then submit a paper IDR application. We have strategy sessions where we go over this in more specifics. We walk people through the online. We walk them through how to get the application and things. You don't need us, but that is something that we offer if it is confusing for you. There's a lot of Reddit forums about this as well, but double consolidation is a great way to reduce payments if you have Parent Plus loans. What pay is good for is grad loans. It has a 20-year provision. That is going to close on July 1. If you're already in pay, great, but you will not be able to get in pay. Think of it this way. If you have just a handful of years left, then you might want to choose pay if you have grad loans because the forgiveness happens in 20 years versus 25. But your payment will be a little higher because the way it's configured, pay is going to be a little higher than save. So it is something that you want to think about. ICR is another option. There's a payment option that it uses that's non-income based. Won't really get into it here, but it's called the 12-year amortization. You might want to read about that a little bit. I do want to spend a bit of time on the public service things here. Do we have any other questions now, though?
I think one question that came in was, I'm going to phrase it, is a double consolidation necessary for any other type of loan type or only the parent plus?
Only the parent plus loans. You can just do a regular consolidation for any other loans, and you can get into save and things like that. It's a backdoor way into save for those with parent plus loans because otherwise they would be limited to ICR, and ICR is a 20% payment, which is a lot higher than 10 or even 5. And it's also only using 100% of poverty versus 225%. So it's using a bigger chunk to figure out what your student loan payment is. And usually it's several hundred or even thousands more. So only for parent plus loans.
And then another question that came through was, you mentioned that consolidating does not affect the FFEL loans held by a private lender. I, Mhm.
Go ahead.
I previously consolidated in 2007 and have a 2.65 interest rate and have less than 9 years left to pay. Is it worth it? Or can this program apply? And then also, are there any programs for private loans yet?
When did, if you can ask the borrower, when did their earliest loan repayment date start? In other words, when was 6 months after they graduated? That's when a loan payment is required to be paid. Because
So,
if it was a while ago, which usually with FFEL loans it is, then even though she has 9 years under her current plan, she may actually be closer if she converts those to direct loans now. And when you do a consolidation online, you hit submit at the very end. So you can enter all your info. You can see exactly what your loan interest rate will be, what the balance will be, who the servicer will be. You can see what your payment would be. You can see all of that before you hit submit. So that way, full transparency. You don't have surprises that way. And the
and they
first
said
couple.
2007 or 2008, just to give you that information. They said that.
Okay. Well, 2007, so 27 would be 20 years. So if these loans are mostly undergrad loans, then the forgiveness turns into a 2027, which is a 3-year term remaining. If they're grad loans, then it's an 8-year term that's remaining. I would want 3, but more than 9 for sure. 8 versus 9, it's not that much difference. But you get all of your credit, all your IDR credit that you've accumulated. Don't worry about losing that. Now, if you consolidate May 1st, you will lose that. This is a deadline that you have to submit the consolidation before April 30. Do not do so afterwards or you lose that prior time.
Got it.
Okay.
No further questions right now.
Okay. So public service loan forgiveness. I know that a lot of our listeners here are public service. So I did want to mention that if you're worried that you've missed that October 31, I think it was 2022 deadline for the limited waiver, don't worry. You still can convert your older FFEL loans to qualify because there'll be newer direct loans by the time that your approval is looked at. For folks who have payments that have been refused in the past, they are being counted. This IDR audit is basically going to give you credit as if you had been making a payment that month. So regardless of whether your payment was a penny short, $10 short, wrong kind of loan, wrong kind of payment, whatever it is, they will count that now. So this IDR audit is automatically happening. Everyone's getting emails usually 30 days in advance saying we're going to do it. And then you get a letter saying at the conclusion that they have done it. The letters that we've seen have basically said you qualified for forgiveness on a certain date. It usually was during the COVID time. And if payments were made after that, you're actually entitled to a refund if they're direct loans. Reason for that is the government owns the direct loans. They often don't own the FFEL loans, so they can't offer a refund on those. That's another reason why maybe a FFEL loan is better off as a direct loan, because if there's any Biden forgiveness, it will only apply to direct loans. Interest waivers and things, direct loans. There's just so many reasons I think that direct loans are much more advantageous than the older FFEL loans. They are reviewing the applications and re-reviewing them. One of the points of contention with public service, well, a couple. First of all, you have to be working public service at the time that you submit your application for discharge at the end of the 10 years, and until they approve that. You have to be working public service. That's one thing that has not changed. And so if you've completed your 10 years, you've got to still be working public service until they approve you. The other thing is they're doing these reviews one at a time. So it makes it very confusing because there's been different, the first public service that didn't work, 99% were rejected. Then they had, I forget all the names now, but they had some kind of fix for that. Then they had the limited waiver, and now they have the IDR audit. So every single one is being reviewed separately. So you may get a letter that says, okay, you have these many qualifying public service payments. You have these many that are potentially qualifying. That means that they've got to do another review, probably one of the other fixes. They look at that. And then the third column will usually say, here's how much you have remaining. The remaining is what you've got to worry about, because that means that they don't have an employer certification for that time, and they don't have payments that would count for that time. So if you think that that's wrong, the ombudsman, which we've got some information in here later, is a good way to address anything that you think is wrong in the calculations. Now, I don't want to spend too much time borrower defenses. If you went to ITT, any one of those schools that have closed, I don't mean to just focus on ITT. I just know that was a big one. There was a settlement. There's the website for some of the particulars on the settlement. It's still running. So in other words, if you file a borrower defense claim now, doesn't mean it won't be looked at, but it means that we don't know who will be doing the looking. We don't know how long it's going to take. Technically, post-class members, in other words, if you file after the deadline of, I think it was June 22 of 2021, you're not a member of the class, but they have to review you within 36 months. I don't remember if there's a third class after that of people who submit even after a deadline. It's all on that website for the dates and when it's submitted. The key is, though, is don't rely on this. Yes, it's great, but the income-driven plans are working very well. Public service is now working very well. Try to take advantage of other opportunities for forgiveness that exist now. Maybe have one of these applications out there, but if you haven't met the deadline to be in the settlement so far, it's a little tenuous because we don't know when it's going to be looked at or who's going to actually be looking at it. Total and permanent disability discharge. This is really wonderful. We have folks who haven't been able to work, doing what they used to do because of different ailments and things, but yet they may not qualify for Social Security disability. That's okay. The total and permanent disability allows for a physician to sign a certification that you are not able to work for 5 years or more. And when I say not able to work, that doesn't mean that you can't do little stuff. It just means that you can't work at what you used to do, what you're trained for, what you went to school for, what you're experienced at. Many of our clients who have been approved for disability, they are able to work some, not a lot, but some. There used to be an income cap of the poverty level for a family of two. In Florida, it was around 17,000, 19,000. That's gone away. There is a 3-year monitoring period that still exists for folks that go back to school. You don't want to do that if you've been approved for Social Security disability discharge. Total and permanent disability discharge. But it's working. It's working really well. And so maybe reach out to us if you have that. It has been expanded. Nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and psychiatrists now can also sign. But this is perfect for someone who is not able to work full-time doing what they used to do, to be able to get a discharge of their student loans. Home ownership, basically you can use the Fresh Start Initiative. It's good through a while. I don't think it expires this September. I think it might be good after that. I'd have to look again. But you can cure a default using the Fresh Start Initiative. That's very fast. Once it expires, you'll have to go back to the old rehabilitation or consolidation to cure a default. So right now it's a free third way. It does clear for mortgage underwriting, clear the default. And so that's good. And so these tactics, these different things that you can do, they're all ways to keep your student loan payment as low as possible. When to recertify, how to recertify, what income to use for that. Should you double consolidate on a Parent Plus loans? Some people even consolidated their loans together, husband and wives. That program is discontinued, but there's a lot of people who are trapped in that program with a double, with basically a spouse consolidation loan. There are ways to separate that now. There'll be an application here shortly. Right now, you want to notify the Ombudsman office that you're going to separate them, and then tell your servicer that you want your loans placed in forbearance until you separate them. They have said that any forbearances while you're waiting for this separation, this application to exist, they will count for the IDR credit, even though maybe the application might not be available by the time the IDR count happens. That's okay. They've said that that's going to count. So hopefully that will not change. There's a new way in town to get rid of these loans in bankruptcy. I know it's not talked about a lot. It used to be very, very difficult to get rid of student loans in bankruptcy. We've been very successful for years in getting rid of private loans. We argue a lot of times that they're non-qualified education loans. They're really nothing more than a credit card. They have cosigners, they have high rates of interest. They were given to go to vocational schools or schools that were not on the list, the school list, Title IV school, things like that. But now there's a way to get rid of them if they're federal loans, and it's called an attestation process. And so basically you file the underlying bankruptcy, and then you fill out some additional forms and file the adversary complaint, which is basically a lawsuit within the bankruptcy, saying, well, I have, these hardships, these different problems. The form outlines all this stuff. And it's really good for those with direct loans because the DOJ process does not apply to anything that's not a direct loan. So it's another reason to be direct. It's really good for those who maybe went to a school that's closed, but for some reason you've missed that borrower defense deadline. It's really good for those who have an injury, but not enough that they are prevented from working, but maybe it's enough that they can't really excel at their job. They can't do overtime. They can't go above and beyond. It's good for a lot of things. Basically, I think the underlying rules that we're trying to focus on is loans that are more than 10 years old. We're trying not to do them for loans that are younger than that. We're trying to do this for clients who have direct loans. We initially were focused on those clients who were in their 50s and 60s, but we've seen discharges for people who are in their 30s and 40s. So I don't think that's accurate at all. It is a little cumbersome because you have to file the adversary complaint, and you have to then stay discovery and do some things during that case while the DOJ and Department of Ed reviews your attestation form. But it is a way for many of your lower income, if they end up needing to file bankruptcy and they have filed bankruptcy, they may want to consider getting rid of their federal loans using the new DOJ attestation process. All right, now before we start talking about private loans, I'd like to see if Alexis, if you've gotten any more questions that have come in.
We did get some questions that came in. They are a little lengthy. Bear with me. Okay. The first one is, this may be a general question, but if you have applied for public service program, I'm assuming they mean the public service loan forgiveness program, over 15 years and have graduated repayment plan, but have been advised you don't qualify for forgiveness because of that plan, is something new anticipated for borrowers falling into this category?
That actually is exactly what the IDR audit is intended to address also. Remember, it's to give you credit for if you made the wrong payment, if you're on the wrong payment plan, that's exactly where you are. The extended and accelerated, all those other plans don't count for public service, but they will count under the IDR audit. So you're going to get credit as if you've been in an IDR audit if you have a direct loan. So the importance is make sure you have a direct loan. And then the IDR audit, once it completes, it will see that you have 15 years towards that 10-year time frame. And so you probably will get a letter then that says that you were eligible for forgiveness 5 years ago. And if you have direct loans, arguably anything you've paid on that since will be refunded to you. And that will be in the email as well. So the key is make sure you have direct loans and wait for the IDR audit to be completed.
And the next question that came in, if there is a consolidation of federal loans that are a mix of undergraduate and graduate loans, will the SAVE program forgive the portion of undergraduate loans at the 20-year mark and then the graduate loans at the 25-year mark? Or if
Yes.
there's a mix, will the loan forgiveness begin at 25 years?
If there's a mix, what will happen is the undergrad loans will be forgiven after the 20 years. Your payment will remain the same because it's income based, even though the balance might be lower for the next 5 years. And so if your loans are not consolidated, there are times that you might want to pay towards the loans that are grad loans so that you can reduce that time. Like if the loans that are remaining after the 20 years are small, you might actually choose to pay them off rather than remain in an income-driven plan for the remaining 5 years if your undergrad was the larger portion. But yeah, undergrad would be forgiven after 20 and 25 for the other. So with your SAVE payment, you won't see a difference until 25 years if you have grad loans because of that. But the balance will be lower. You might want to pay it off and be out if your payment's high.
If loans began repayment in 2003, does the IDI audit go back that far for forgiveness all the way to 2003?
Yes, it does. For public service loan forgiveness, it will only go back to the inception of that program, which was 2007, I believe, October of 2007. But if you are in non-public service, you will get IDR credit going back to whenever. There's no deadline, no start date on that.
Okay. And there's one more question that came in. It sounds a little specific to me, so I'll read it out loud if it's something you can't answer or not. This person says that they're on the studentloan.gov website looking at consolidation.
Mhm.
This person is about 4 years into repayment. When this person is looking at the payoff date under the consolidation simulator with the estimated PSLF pay date, it shows 10 years out. Does that sound like a mistake? I know you said that the payer wouldn't lose their payment history. I
Okay.
guess, yeah.
Yeah, good question. So because of the Department of Ed has done basically 20 years of changes in like a 1 year period, and not everything is kept up. Some of the disclosures on the consolidation application are actually not accurate. They don't talk about you not losing your prior IDR credit, which is absolutely the case until April 30. You do not lose your credit, but after that, it's going to revert back to, yes, you lose your credit. So I think maybe they left the disclosures the same. The same thing goes with the simulator. The simulator doesn't have the benefit of the IDR audit yet. It's not calculated in there. It doesn't have the benefit of the SAVE change of payments for the undergrad once July 1. So it's really nice to use to anticipate what your payment would be. But it's not perfect because it doesn't always have the tracking installed in it to reflect the time that you might already have accrued. So if you've already been making payments, yes, you don't lose those payments. The calculator just simply doesn't reflect that, but your time period will end at the correct number, which is 10 years or 120 months of public service.
Okay, awesome. Those were all the questions. Thank you.
But remember, you have to still be working public service, and it may take MOHELA, who's the public service servicer, it may take them a few months to process the application for discharge. You have to continue to remain employed there. That's why we encourage, while you don't have to submit new employment forms every single year, particularly if you're at the same place, you could just wait till the 10 years. I sometimes encourage you to do it every year just so that they can do some of the work ahead of time. And you can make sure that your job classification is still correct. Make sure that your employer is still correct. Sometimes they change how payroll's paying you. You need to know about those problems early on and have them all addressed so that when it comes to the 9th year, it's super easy. MOHELA just counts your last 12 and you're out in a couple months. Right now, it's taking probably 6 months at least for the approvals to occur. And I think it might be taking longer now because MOHELA now they're taking over all of Navient servicing. They have their own public servicing. I I don't know if they've just been fined by the Department of Ed. There's some issues there. And so it could take longer than you expect. So don't plan on leaving your job before that approval is obtained. All right, so let's talk a minute about private loans. We have 9 minutes left, and I want to leave a couple minutes here at the end. The important thing, I think, to focus on private student loans is that, number one, they don't settle. If you're current, if you're making payments, they're just going to want to keep getting those payments. They're not going to want to settle with you. You have to default, unfortunately, for them to do the settlements that we like to target, which is basically a third. Other than that, they're going to say, nope, we want you to still pay. If you do settle, it's tax-free through the end of December 2025, and that's due to one of the stimulus bills early on in COVID here. And so even if you have a payment that is supposed to go for 5 years, if you can do like a balloon payment December of 2025 and have it clear your account, then you will not be taxed for that forgiveness. And if you recall, a servicer doesn't have to, but they may send a 1099 reflecting the amount of the forgiveness, which might be, 2/3 of your loan. And then the government may tax that under Section 108 of the IRS code. I don't do taxes. That's pretty much all I know. But you could have a big tax bill. So sometimes we have our clients agree to a lower payment, but then we encourage them to do everything they can to try to pay that off before the end of 2025 to get that tax forgiveness waived, basically federal tax forgiveness waived. Different ways to attack a private student loan. Sometimes the documentation is faulty. Statute of limitations applies to a private loan. It does not apply to federal loans. We argue they're non-qualified education loans. We get the interest rate reduced. These private loans have interest of 10%, 15%. If just the interest alone is killer on these loans. And we're dealing a lot with folks who have filed bankruptcy previously. And so we often allege that, our client didn't file an adversary proceeding, but neither did they. So that means that did the student loan survive or not? It's kind of a Schrodinger cat kind of argument. You don't really know until the court tells you. Well, if they're wrong and they've been sending you collection letters and they're wrong, they could be liable under our different consumer laws. If we're wrong and we owe the loan and it was always a qualified education loan, then we could owe more in interest. So there's issues there. But basically, the laws have changed quite a bit. I have here the Hamilton case and Woodard v. Navient. They're both cases you can look up that talk about folks who have previously filed bankruptcy, that arguably their loans were discharged in that case, even though they didn't actually file anything that said so. Unfortunately, with bankruptcy, I do a lot of bankruptcy, and unfortunately, the orders of discharge, they don't really have a nice list of here's the loans are gone, here's the loans that still exist. You have to go back to the schedules, and then even then, you don't know whether that loan, how it was treated necessarily in that order. So sometimes there's questions and people don't know whether they owe a loan after bankruptcy. And that's where there's been a lot of case law as to whether or not that loan's actually owed and what to do about that. We use a lot of consumer laws. We use the Fair Credit Reporting Act is awesome. We love that because these servicers, they just don't get it right on the credit report. They often will over-report. They'll have the loan twice. They'll show a higher balance than what's owed. Those, under the FCRA, once you file a dispute, they have to get that right. And it's basically a really nice way to get a good amount of damages, or in our case, an offset of what's owed in our settlement. So we get some tremendous waivers by using the FCRA claim as well. FDCPA, we like that, but it is limited usually to $1,000, so it's not as important for us. We do that more to escalate it to a higher decision maker a lot of times. Many states have their own private laws. Here in Florida, we have something called the FCCPA. It goes out a little longer. It goes 2 years instead of 1. And then we usually send cease and desist letters and things early on, because if they continue to contact your client after receiving your letter, then that, of course, is unlawful. So we use those violations to either sue if we want, or to escalate to a different decision maker, or to get some kind of better settlement. There's just different things there. So consumer laws are very, very good. Bankruptcy can be very good with these private loans if people went to schools that are potentially dischargeable. So in summary, the point I'd like to make is just, you have to do something. You can't just rely on your loans are going to be forgiven. Oftentimes you've got to do something. If you've consolidated in the past, if you've done so before 2010, you might have a FEL consolidation. So it's important for you to look on studentaid.gov, see if you have a direct loan or not. Even if you've done a consolidation, it might not be a direct consolidation. Forbearance is something that people thought was a good thing. Sometimes it's not. It's a horrible thing. I would try to be on an income-driven plan if possible if your payments are not enough to make a full payment. And then you want to plan out. You want to know what is your terms, budget them, try to figure out, which are the higher interest rates, which have co-signers. Many of the loans, private loans, will have an option, and if you maintain your payment history for 24 months, they'll remove a co-signer. I hardly ever see a co-signer being removed because that's the person with the money. The parent has the money. So I just don't like that because they hardly ever do it. And then this on-ramp procedure is a process that you don't have to make a federal payment through. I think it's August. It's coming up to be ending here soon. But you can take that money that was going to go for your federal loans, maybe pay down your private loans instead. So there's different ways to try to, plan for your future. And then if you think the calculations are wrong, the ombudsman office is a good way to have someone look at your account. They do a very thorough review. What's really nice about communications with the ombudsman office is they tend to say your question and then they address your question in writing. If you ask your servicer, if you just call and ask your servicer, I can almost guarantee that you're going to get 3 or 4 answers if you call 5 or 6 times. You're not going to know what question they looked at. You're not going to know the training of that individual and if they even know what they're talking about. And they might just be reading from a script. The ombudsman office will give you something in writing, and it will be very well researched by more higher trained or educated individuals, and they will restate your question often. So I really like that. And the best way to start is to initiate a case and then go with them. They also have a phone number there too. Here's some other additional resources and sources and things, material that might be helpful. And then our contact information with our phone number there, our email, and our YouTube channel. And so the quote there, student loans shouldn't be a life sentence, I stole that from, I think it was a Kansas judge. It was a bankruptcy judge, and he was basically, providing a dischargeability ruling, and they really shouldn't. But a lot of people look at their student loans as a life sentence. They look at them as they can't start a family, they can't leave their job, they can't buy a house, they can't do anything. Instead, create a plan to deal with your student loans. Take your life back from them. It can be done. There's a lot of opportunities out there, but you usually have to do a little something to do that, and that's where we come in, or the resources that are offered by this webinar, as well as other governmental sites and things, and the press releases by Department of Ed and so forth. So Alexis, I'll turn this back over to you, and I think we're right about 12 o'clock or
Yes,
1
we
o'clock.
are. Yes, we are. Thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful. I know there are still a few questions that came in through the Q&A. They are long. Should I suggest that that person maybe email you with the question, or would you like me to read it out loud? I know we're right at 12.
Um, since they're long, we probably can't cover them. I don't mind. I mean, I'd rather than in an email, unless someone wants to set up a strategy session with us. That's probably a good option. If you have any quick ones, we definitely can address that now. Or if you have like a repeat long one.
So a quick question was the buyback program. I know it's something that I don't think we talked about too much in this session, but what's up with that? Who should use that? Why?
What the buyback program is, and I haven't read up a lot on that myself, but it's basically for someone who didn't make a payment for a period of time, you can buy back that time as if you had made an IDR payment. It's really, really good for those in public service because it would end your public service requirement of the 120 months much earlier. So that's where buyback is. I can't talk specifically about it at this present time because I haven't looked at it lately. There
And
may have
then
been some changes.
And then another question was, there's been a slew of administrative forbearances lately. I think it applied to last month. Is that something you're familiar with? And can you give any clarity as to why that might have happened and what that means for public service loan forgiveness?
The reason why is that they're bogged down. MOHELA is putting everybody, I understand, in administrative forbearance. Normally, administrative forbearance will not count towards an IDR for public service credit for that month. Even during the IDR audit and things like that, it's not supposed to count. However, the Department of Ed has recognized that its servicers cannot keep up, and they're telling people now that the administrative forbearance during this period of time will count for public service. So I'm hearing that it is counting, even though it's kind of not supposed to, and it's because it's the servicers that just can't process stuff right now.
Right.
And the other thing is the on-ramp procedure. I covered that really quickly. That's where if you don't make a payment through August of this year, you would not be subject to discipline. In other words, there's no negative credit reporting. There's no, you got to catch up your payments. There's no default or anything like that. But there's also no credit for IDR. So we did not like on-ramp for people who are accumulating credit. We wanted to have people in an IDR. And then now administrative forbearance if the servicer cannot complete their documentation.
Got it. Got it. Well, awesome. I think you covered all of the questions, covered all of that substance in this time. Folks, you heard if you want someone, to do consult with you and to kind of actually look at your loans. I know Christie's law firm, can be hired or gone through consulting. I recommend it. I think it's something that I'm going to do, especially after listening to this. At the end of the day, it's a hefty amount that we're all saddled with. So if you can get the help, you should definitely take it. And Christy, thank you so much. Just thank you for being a fierce advocate for consumers, for out of the kindness of your heart, sharing this with the public interest community, just with the true goal of making sure we know about it and know that we have to take action. Just thank you for all you do. And also thank you to everyone watching, because all that you do out in the community every single day is incredibly important. And, obviously I couldn't agree more that your student loans shouldn't be a life sentence. So I really, really hope that this session not only got you some CLE credits, but also really helped you, one, know you're not alone, and two, motivate you to do what you need to do to take your power back. All right, Christy, any last words before we sign off?
No, thank you very much. And take a look at those PowerPoints. I'm sorry I didn't have the first 4 up, but there's some meat in there on some of those other programs if you think you might have an injury or something like that. I went through those very quickly just to try to raise awareness that the programs exist and they shouldn't be ignored because they're working really, really well. Hope everyone has a wonderful day and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.